So once again, good morning, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining this session of the Higher Education Conference being sponsored by and organized by the USAID. So my name is Pauline ESSA, and I'm the Director of Research and Insight at an organization called Education Sub-Saharan Africa. We're based in the UK and Africa, and we work with partners across the Sub-Saharan African region. I'm presenting today with my colleague, Dr. Samuel Asari, who is a research manager at ESSA. And today we'll be talking to you about how higher education students in East and West Africa can facilitate their transition to employment. And I want to keep this as interactive as possible, since we've got just under an hour for this session. But I would appreciate it if you could let us run through the presentation slides. Please note your questions or comments in the chat, or note them somewhere as we go along. And then once we finish with the presentation, we can then take questions and answers, but also hear your own views on this topic and how we can share lessons that are being learned in terms of what's happening in this space. So if we could move to the next slide, please. So in terms of this presentation, there's just a brief outline out there. So I'm going to introduce the organization, provide you with the context under which this study is being conducted, what our research objectives are, the kind of methodology we're using, and at that point, my colleague Samuel will join to talk about the methodology, what we are finding so far, the conclusions we are drawing from the research and insights, and also the next steps for the study. And at that point, we'll invite you all in for that wider discussion. Thank you. And on to the next slide. So in terms of Education Sub-Saharan Africa, or ESSA for short, we're a small organization, as I said, based in the UK and Africa. And really, we're about using data and evidence to improve the quality of education in Sub-Saharan Africa and to ensure that young people can transition into meaningful and sustainable and decent employment. Because after all, we know that with the youth population in Africa and the projections for the population world continuing to grow, there is a need to actually have a vision for what we do with these young people to ensure that they contribute to society in a meaningful way. And in terms of how we work, our mission is really about starting with universities and colleges, because given our focus on tertiary education, we feel that young people would get the best exposure to knowledge generation and translation in these institutions. That is where we have the opportunity to train the next generation of teachers, health workers, people who will really transform society. And so it's the best place for us to start engaging with those, providing that data and knowledge, and seeing how best we can support them to generate these young people who can really make a difference through work and societal improvements. So all our work is aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, really to ensure that SDG 4, Sustainable Development 4, and the decent work, SDG 8, are addressed through our work. We also bear in mind the strategies that important bodies such as the Africa Union are developing to make sure our work is aligned with what they are doing. Can I please move to the next slide? So in terms of the work that ESSA does, we have 4 main strands. And the first is to do with how are young people in Africa actually accessing education. And we know the data and evidence tells us that only about 10% of young Africans who are eligible to access tertiary education actually do get the opportunity. So that's compared with a global average of about 40%. So we really are lagging behind. And it's even worse for those from marginalized groups such as refugees, where access is just at about 1% compared to a global average of 3 to 5%. So a lot more needs to be done. We know that in Africa, young people based in rural areas, for example, or those living with disability, also have even more challenges or barriers to accessing tertiary education. So a lot of what we do is about understanding what these challenges are, but also working with partners on the ground to understand how we can co-develop solutions to address these challenges, be it focusing on the barriers such as the lack of scholarships or understanding what other means of student finance can be provided to enable young people to access such education. We also have a second work stream that looks at the quality of education. So once these young people do access tertiary education, what is the quality of the experience that they're obtaining? Are we really getting them ready for the world of work? Are they being prepared to have that kind of critical thinking skills, the intellectual ability to contribute to in groups, all these soft skills, as we say, that they need to be able to exit university ready for work? What is the ratio of students to staff, for example, which has a direct impact on the quality of the education they receive? And how are we connecting them with the world of work, which then leads me to the third strand. So during their time in university, how are they, or in colleges, how are we getting them ready for work? What is the engagement between universities and employers, for example? What is the connection with policymakers to ensure that policies being developed are set in the right environment to allow these young people to transition into work? And what kind of jobs are they finding when they graduate, and how sustainable and meaningful are those jobs? The fourth strand we work on is really about that education knowledge ecosystem. How can we work with African partners, different stakeholders, be they education providers, be they policymakers, be they funders of education, or even the young people themselves? How do we ensure that knowledge is shared across these different stakeholders and used for important decision-making for societal progress? And we know already from the research we've done that there is a big deficit in terms of that access to data and the dissemination of that data. And so part of what we do is about unlocking that data and engaging with stakeholders who have the power to change the system to make sure that more can be done to make data accessible for decision making. And across all these four streams, the issue of gender is an important one for us. We want to know how many young people are, how many young females are accessing this education, and how are they progressing through the different levels of education? How many are now staff within these academic institutions? We know that as you go higher up the chain, the number of women drops. For example, we know that in Sub-Saharan Africa, only 2.5% of vice chancellors are female. At the professorial level, it's about 8% in some countries and even less in others. And so we're keeping an eye on what the data is telling us. And all of this data is coming from African researchers and African institutions. And we're trying to highlight that data across all levels. So in terms of the quality of education and the transition to work as well, we're keen to understand what the data is telling us about the impact on young women at the education level, and also in the transition to employment. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So that brings me to the focus of this particular presentation in line with the conference, and that is that focus on transition to work. I alluded to part of the problem, but in more detail, at the moment, we know that about 10 to 12 million young people are graduating from African tertiary institutions each year. And yet only about a third of them are finding jobs. And even then, those jobs may not necessarily be the ones that they want. We know that many of the youth who are employed are actually underemployed to an extent in terms of the skills and the knowledge they've acquired. They're then taking up jobs that are below what they could be doing. Some are also employed in like short-term contracts that they're always moving from one thing to another. It's just not fit for purpose in many cases when you look at the investment they've made in their tertiary education. And alongside this challenge we're finding in terms of underemployment and lack of employment, we're also hearing from African CEOs, so those running employment organizations in Africa, that they're struggling to find graduates with the skills that they need to be able to employ them. So about 65% of CEOs in a recent survey indicated that they can't find the skills force, the workforce that they need. And particularly it's because the young people they find do not have the skills they need for work. So they are graduates, but they're coming in more with the theoretical education and less of the practical education. And this is compared to the global percentages, there's more of a problem in Sub-Saharan Africa that needs further investigation and also coming up with adequate solutions to try and understand how we can address this important problem. And it's in the interest of Africans as well as non-Africans to take this seriously, because we know that by 2030, for example, the number of young people in Africa will double from the current 420 million young people within the ages of 15 to 30 years. We're going to have about 830 million. So where are all these young people going to go? And Africa is and will be the youngest population in the world, and that's the workforce for the future. So if we don't get it right now and into the future, that could be a big issue for us globally. And in terms of higher education stakeholders, how are we now thinking about addressing this issue? It's not one stakeholder's efforts that will address the problems. We need to bring together these different stakeholders, the young people themselves, the employers, the education providers, the investors in education and employment, policymakers. We all need to come together to try and address this huge problem. But importantly, I think young people also need to take some responsibility in terms of getting themselves ready for the world of work and understanding how they can increase their chances of finding that meaningful employment that they would actually be interested in sustaining long term. And so what we've tried to do through this work at ESSA is to understand what are young people doing about this situation? Do they recognize the problem? And if so, how are they thinking about improving their own chances to overcome this big barrier? If we can move to the next slide, please. And so for this particular project, the research objectives that we've come up with as a pilot study to really start to understand what's happening in this space is to investigate the role that the higher education students can play in their transition to employment. And to delve deeper into this topic, what we're trying to do now is identify the ways in which young students are advocating for change or for improvement in their circumstances to increase their chances of employment. How are they doing it? Who are they engaging with to raise the profile of their situation and to amplify their voices in this space? But also, how are they using, for example, social networks to try and address the situation and improve their employment opportunities? If they are not, why are they not? Do they understand the power of such networks in helping them to achieve these aims? A third objective is to understand how students are making decisions about their employment options, and are they doing this consciously or not? Who are they engaging with to make these decisions? How are they investing in other ways in which they can maybe stand out among the millions of young people looking for work each year? What are the kind of skills that they are obtaining within and outside the universities, for example, to help them to transition into such employment? These are all questions that we think can help direct us as researchers, direct those who are making those decisions, but also importantly, help the young people to be able to find and maintain these meaningful jobs, or even create jobs for themselves and others as they leave tertiary education. So at this point, if we move to the next slide, I will just hand over to my colleague Samuel, who will take us through the methodology and the findings of the research to date. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Yes, so I'll continue from the methodology. So in order for us to address our research objectives, we adopted two methods. The first one is a systematic review, and we also conducted interviews and focus group discussion. So in terms of the systematic review, we look into academic databases such as Scopus, Web of Science, African Journals Online to understand publications coming from Africa and outside Africa that address this particular research topic. In addition to the academic databases, we also explored working papers from charities and other development organizations as a supplement. We conducted interviews with students from higher education institutions in Rwanda and Ghana. We also spoke with executives of the All African Student Union, as well as some graduates or alumni. We also interviewed employers and had a roundtable discussion for CEOs that we had in Ghana. So through this method, what did we find? Next slide, please. So the literature review showed very, very interesting, and as you can see, very complex kind of factors that facilitates student transition to employment. So we found 4 main stakeholders. We have the tertiary education institutions, we have the employers, which include government. We also have charities and other development organizations, as well as students themselves. Some of these points were raised in the previous the panel that we had. I mean, the panelists are a very great discussion, bringing out some of these points that are captured in the literature. So, for example, what tertiary education institution can do, we heard about curriculum reforms, trying to make sure that the skills that employers require are incorporated in the curriculum, so students can get the opportunity to learn these skills to make them ready for work and life. And we also had issues around pedagogies. How do we help students to develop, we are saying soft skills, and the soft skills, how do we create teaching and learning environment that will help students to develop these skills? If we are always lecturing for 1 hour, that might not be helpful in terms of helping students to develop critical thinking skills or teamwork. So how can higher education institutions be able to restructure their pedagogies that will create opportunity for students to work together, maybe in small groups, or use active learning strategies to help them to develop their critical thinking skills. We also had, I think, one of the panel, Lucy, my colleagues, talking about the role of career services. You know, when the students come into the institutions, they come with a lot of ideas, and they most of the time don't know the particular career that they want to pursue. So the institution, through their career services, will have to help students to reflect on their strengths and weaknesses, and be able to understand themselves, be able to position themselves in making decisions for the real career. And also helping students to develop transition skills. For example, CV writing, how to present yourself for interviews, and cover letter writing. All these skills are very important if we want to help students to transition successfully to employment. Employers also have a role to play, as we learned from the panel. Employers need to let institutions be aware of the skills they need, because if you want me to produce students that meet your skills, then I should be aware of this particular skill. So there should be kind of very partnership between higher education institution and the industry, so industry can let institutions know the skills that they require, so they can incorporate these skills into the curriculum as to help students to develop these skills. And government also have a role to play here. Investment in apprenticeships and TVET, for example, is a way that the government can also play supporting student transition. Charities also have a role to play. I mean, this conversation we are having that has been put together by USAID is one of the options to encourage discussions around some of these topics, so we'll be able to address it. But all these are very important. But the point is, what should students also do? I mean, students have a role to play in this transition. So that is the focus of this particular presentation. Next slide, please. So we are looking at advocacy, how students can use advocacy as a way of helping them to transition into employment. And we had a conversation with the All African Student Union executives, and some of them were talking about advocacy at different levels, at the continental levels, engaging with maybe the African Union, which has signed up into some of these global policy documents that emphasizes helping young people to develop their skills that will help the transformation of Africa. So monitoring the work of the AU and to ensure whether they are in line with, what they have signed up to. They're also talking about the national levels and even the institutional level, issues around students serving as pressure group, especially during elections or presidential campaigns, asking questions around how politicians can incorporate employment opportunities for students. And one examples of how advocacy can play a very important role is what graduate students said regarding an association that was formed in Ghana, Unemployed Graduate Association of Ghana, which more or less put kind of engage stakeholders to create conducive environment for job. And this changed eventually through discussion with the National Youth Authority, and now the association is called Association of Graduates in Skill Development, and the government is helping them with finance, with training, and also supporting the members. I would say that there are still unemployed graduates in Ghana, but because the association is no more in existence, they're there's been kind of positive outcome through this association. Next, please. Yeah, we also talk about skills acquisition. Institutions will have to provide opportunities for students to develop skills, and some of the institutions provide entrepreneurship as a course. And career service centers also sometimes organize a training on CV and other transition skills that will benefit students. But most of the time, students do not sign up or participate in these activities, maybe because maybe they want to focus on the academic aspects of their work. As one of the panelists was saying, that the students think that once they get good grades or high grades, they are likely to get employed, so they don't take some of these opportunities seriously. Next, please. Yeah, there's also issue around students also advocating for kind of curriculum reform, where institutions will blend practice with theory, not just teaching students theory, but creating opportunity for students to practice what they learn, working with industry, of course, through internships and other work placements, so students can apply some of the theory to practice. Next, please. There's also an employer suggesting that, I believe we all agree with the fact that there's information explosion. The internet has almost anything that you want to learn. So as an employer from Ghana, also suggesting that these days very easy to learn. So students can also learn on their own through the internet to be able to develop some of these skills. So to position them better when they complete their program. Next, please. Networking and collaboration is something which is very, very also important, which was stressed by a student from Ghana, that students will explore opportunities to collaborate with each other to develop business business proposal or ideas and to enter into business ventures. And you all agree with me that across Africa, there are a lot of young entrepreneurs, people who have come out of universities and are doing very well. Since I come from Ghana and I'm more familiar with the Ghanaian context, I will just mention two people. There is a lady entrepreneur in Ghana who finished university, and she was finding it difficult to get a job, but she went into production of natural hair and body care products, and she's doing very, very well at the moment. She's called Israela, and she's even training other young people and also less privileged women in the rural communities. There's also another young man who completed University of Ghana. He is also into shoe production, who is also doing very well. So there are examples of young people who are doing very well, using the skill that they've acquired from school. Next, please. Yes, there's also an issue of not just tapping into what we have in Africa, but also reaching out to Africans in the diaspora who are also doing very well, so they can connect them with those in Africa, so they can work together to share ideas and to be able to address some of these unemployed situations on the continent. Next, please. There's also social networking, or it's really important, and a study in South Africa suggests that about 41% of employers recruit through their existing employees. So they do refer, they contact the existing employees, and then they will also pass on the job vacancies to their family members and to their friends. So networking, social networking, is a very, very important avenue where a student can explore to be able to get a job when they graduate. Next, please. But there's also a point that an employer made, an employer from Ghana, that students should be flexible in the way they approach the issue of employment and unemployment. Most of the time, when students are going for internship, I mean, students will want organizations where probably they want to work in when they complete in school. So they want very, very attractive organizations to go to work. You know that there isn't spaces, I mean, some of these organizations. And also, I mean, some countries, tertiary students, when they finish, they do mandatory 1 year service to the states. So students want to go to particular organizations because of probably a potential opportunity of getting employed by that same organization. But I mean, the employer was saying that students should be open-minded and then try less maybe attractive organization, because at the end of the day, these environments all help them to develop the skills that they can show for in future applications. Next, please. Yeah, there's also a very important point that was made by my employer from Rwanda, that there are instances where students reject job offers because of low salary or location. Yes, you all want big salary, but sometimes we need to start from somewhere, especially when you are fresh from school. You start and then you build your experience, and then you build your CV, and then you can get to your dream job. You don't normally get to your dream job straight. Yeah, there are people who get the opportunity, but most people have to start from somewhere before you're able to get to your dream job. Personally, I know a young man who is unemployed, but because he rejected an offer of a vacancy in certain part of Ghana where he felt he wouldn't want to go and work, so he is unemployed at the moment. So these are some of the issues that employers raised. Next, please. There's also issues around confidence and skills audits. I know institutions will have to also support students to develop this confidence, give them an opportunity to try and fail. But students should also apply what they learn. And so in this instance, a graduate from Rwanda, talking about how she was able to get a teaching appointment, even though she didn't have a PhD. But a PhD was a requirement, but because she had experience of teaching that particular subject and also experience of doing some research in that particular area, she was able to show that she has that skills and knowledge to be able to do the job. So that kind of confidence also helped this particular student to get a job. Next, please. Also understanding your strengths and weaknesses, I mean, it's very, very important. Knowing what you can do and what you can and how you can develop these skills also help, so that you don't end up going for every job opportunity. If you understand your skills, you'll be able to match it to that particular job, so you can be targeted and selective. Because I might say it's hard work applying for job vacancies. So if you're able to be selective and be targeted, that will be more effective. Next, please. I mean, that's also the last point is taking risks. This is coming from the same student, from same graduate from Rwanda, that she decided to take the risks. She could have said, "Oh, okay, after all, I don't have a PhD, so why should I apply for this particular job? I won't get it." But she invested her time into that, and she got a job. So yes, it's very, very important that we take risks. Somebody told me that, I mean, in school, we learn and we get a test, but in life, we get a test first, and then we learn from the test. Next, please. Yes, so we are, in conclusion, we are saying that addressing youth unemployment in Sub-Saharan Africa, and of course in everywhere, is complex, and it requires the effort of all of us, all hands on deck approach. Next, please. But the point is that, yes, it's important for higher education institutions to do their bit, government do their bit, industry do their bit, other charities and development organizations also do their bit. But students also have the agency and to also do their bit to make sure that this transition is a success. Next, please. So we're encouraging stakeholders, funders and other stakeholders to support students through capacity strengthening and funding, so they'll be able to support their own transition efforts. Next, please. Yes, so the next steps, ESSA will be developing a funding proposal with partners, including the All African Student Union, to scale up this pilot study across Africa, so we'll be able to use the findings to develop training and capacity programs for students across Africa. And please feel free to get in touch with my colleague Pauline or myself with ideas, so we can work together on this very, very important project. Next, please. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Samuel, and thank you to all those who've joined us for the session. We hope we've set the scene for an interesting discussion now. We're happy to take your questions and to try and answer them. We don't have all the answers, but we're here to learn from you as well. So please feel free if you want to turn your camera on, just so we can put some faces to names. But if not, that's fine too. We'll take questions and your thoughts and views on what we've just presented. Over to you. I see that there have been a few in the chat, and our colleague Lucy has started answering some of them. But please feel free if you want to read out your question, or I can start with some of those that have come through. So Rebecca was asking what we do to help raise the profile of the African researchers and unlock data. And some responses have come through already. But in addition to that, and as you'll see from the conference reports we shared, we do a lot of engagement with those who have the power to change the system. And so again, that is those who are investing in education and the transition to employment, and also those who are investing in that data, who have the power to invest in helping us to unlock data across the continent and the sub-region. So we've been engaging directly with a range of funders, mostly outside Africa, but we're trying hard to engage with those on the continent as well, but also policymakers. We need the right environment to make it easy for data sharing and to use that, especially the large quantities of data that is already existing on the continent, to be able to use that effectively for more research and also for action on the ground. And at ESSA, a lot of what we do is about not only generating and sharing research data and evidence, but using that to then bring about change or action. So it's that evidence to action bit that we're really interested in as well. And I've put a link to our Unlocking Data website that we've set up. It's an initial pilot really just to gather like-minded people, share ideas on how we can unlock more of that data, that tons and tons of data sitting on international funders' hard drives that is currently not accessible. We need to find a way to make that available more publicly. Thank you. Any other questions, please? You can do your
maybe the data. Maybe let me add.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the data, I will also encourage the researchers to also share the data, because most of the time, the researchers say we don't have access to data. International organizations should share. Yeah, that is very, very important. This is one aspect of it. But I think that researchers across Africa, including graduate students, we generate a lot of data. So I will also encourage researchers and anyone who is into research. So once you collect the data, after you've used it to publish, you share it so others can also use that data. It will reduce costs because people will have to go around collecting fresh data. So by if there's existing data, people can use it and then can all share that knowledge.
Thanks, Samuel. I should add as well, since people are asking, ESSA also in partnership with the Association of African Universities, AAU, and also Warwick Employment Group, we've also set up the African Education Jobs Board. It's similar to jobs.ac.uk that you have in the UK, and it was set up by the same group that established the UK version. And really, it's our way of, again, starting to make more visual the jobs that are available in academia, at least within Sub-Saharan Africa, and to facilitate employment across the region and movement as well where needed within the Sub-Saharan African region. And so that is another means of highlighting or making visible opportunities for young people to be able to find jobs in academia. I see there was a question about research administration fellows. And again, that's a portal where we're hoping it won't just be academic jobs as in lecturing or postdocs, but that we can use this for the administrating the research support functions, that all these kind of jobs can be made more visible on this portal. I'll put the link in the chat so that those who want to see that can maybe access and also share with others who may not be aware of this platform.
Yeah, I mean, yes, regarding raising the visibility and the use of African evidence, I mean, ESSA to work with the Rare Center at the University of Cambridge to develop the African Education Research Database, which is a catalog of publications by Africans, those who are based in Africa. At least one author should have affiliation with an African institution. So it's a very, very useful platform, which has a lot of information out there, 8 teams, around 120 keywords. So everyone will benefit if you access the database. Hopefully, I'll be able to put the link in the chat so people can explore that. So that's very, very useful information.
Do we have any other questions or contributions from Africa, from beyond Africa, examples of what's working well in terms of helping students to transition to work? We're doing a lot, but we're looking for ideas as well in terms of what more we could be doing to support these young people, because it's tough being a young person in Africa looking for work. Please feel free to raise your virtual hand or stand on your camera. Yeah, we're open. So there's a question that has just come through from Shira, in terms of in our study, did we find any differences in experiences of students who participated in experiential or work-based learning programs versus those who participated strictly in academic programs? I could start by saying that the employers we've engaged with so far are definitely saying they see the difference. In fact, it's not that they can't find applicants, and we've heard this from recruitment agencies as well in Africa. They are inundated with applications from young people looking for work. But the main problem they find is that these people are coming in with the theory-based experience, and they can't answer practical or related questions or questions that involve critical thinking, application of knowledge in the interviews, let alone the sort of task-based studies. And that is the problem they're facing, that they're having to reject lots of applicants and look beyond the continent for Africans in the diaspora who may have had the kind of work-based experience that they're looking for. What they do also emphasize is that for institutions in Africa where there's a practical work-based career service linked placement where students have the opportunity to experience internships or apprenticeships during their study, they see a clear difference in how those students respond in interviews and also when they are offered jobs and start. So actually employers are competing for the few students who can demonstrate that they have the skills to be able to contribute to workforces. And so based on the data and evidence we have so far, absolutely, there's a clear difference between those who've had the exposure and those who haven't. Clear difference between institutions that are making that effort to engage their students in these kind of internships and those that aren't. And employers are competing to find and attract those students from those institutions because the pool is quite narrow. And that's also why we're advocating for young people to also take some responsibility to get themselves into that small pool. Hopefully that pool widens and we get more people employed. Do we have any other questions and suggestions? Actually, one other thing I could add is, yeah, there's a lot of frustration on all sides, from the employer side, from the institution side. There's also clearly the need to link in more with alumni. Where are the people, the young people? Where are the former graduates now, and how can they perhaps help students who are currently in those institutions to be able to overcome some of these challenges? And what some employers are saying is they're having to retrain graduate students to be able to get them ready for joining their organizations. And that's an added cost, and also it elongates the time needed to get young people in. And so some are asking, what's the point of universities then, or tertiary education institutions, if the graduates are unemployable? So there are all these debates that are taking place, and definitely we need all stakeholders around the table. And we've tried to do that recently. We had a stakeholder engagement forum, CEOs of top employers, as well as higher education institution representatives for roundtable events to try and understand the issues on all sides, what the data and evidence is telling us, what the interviews and surveys are telling us, and how we can move forward with this. But it takes perseverance, it takes investment of time and resource, and it takes willing students who want to learn and change their situation. work in progress. So there's a question from Jill asking, what are the skills that these graduates are lacking that forces employers to retrain them? Samuel, do you want to have a go on that? I can add in if needed.
Yeah, thank you very much. When we spoke with employers and also the literature review, I showed very, very interesting finding. It seems that what employers are looking out for in graduates are very similar to what universities also want to achieve. Skills around subject-specific or job-specific skills or subject knowledge. Soft skills, as we call them, critical thinking, communication, and teamwork. These skills are also skills that employers actually require. And according to the employers, when students come, they find it difficult to demonstrate, not all students, but it's very common that students find it difficult demonstrating the critical thinking skills, writing, or also communication skills. So these are some of the skills that they have to also train, as well as the practical aspects of it. So most of the time, the students will have a lot of theory, a lot of academic knowledge when they come. They can talk about what they've learned and all that, but when it comes to doing the work, it becomes challenging because probably they don't get that experience of practicing what they actually learn in class. But I mean, that should be something that industry should also contribute, because students should have that space to be able to practice what they learn before they leave the school. But most of the time, we have limited opportunities for students. So yeah, employers should also take part of the responsibility in training students when they join them. Thank you.
Thanks, Samuel. To add to that, other soft skills that kept coming up across the different employers was having students who can work across different sectors. So people with skills such as that, leadership, ethics, empathy, communication, just understanding cultural nuances and how to work within teams, how to build the right interpersonal relationships. Those are skills that you pick up, I guess, from university, from engaging with different people, but many are coming in just without that readiness. And also, obviously, looking at the future of work, a key skill they're looking for is IT, internet communication, and digital skills. That's something that many are saying they're really struggling to find people with the experience, the expertise. So for example, they're saying they get people applying, lots of people applying for jobs in marketing, for example. They've got MBAs in marketing, MBAs, they've got masters in marketing, but they don't have that practical experience of understanding how, for example, you can use social media now for marketing. And so if they're coming in and telling you how to market something, but they don't know how to use it, tools available now and in the future to do that marketing, then that's a big problem for them. So yeah, those are some of the examples of areas where employers are frustrated because they just don't have people ready to jump in and do the work that is needed at this point. And so again, we think if young people can...
Excuse me, Pauline, I'm sorry. Now I was going to just follow up on that question. So what's the sweet spot then? Because students are, when you're in school, you're encouraged to focus on your academics, right? You have to make those marks, you have to pass this class. But then if for example, your higher education institution doesn't offer any kind of courses on soft skills, when are you supposed to gain those skills? And again, what's the sweet spot between having the academics and the technical knowledge as well as having the soft skills? How do you marry those two?
Thank you. Good question. I think a lot of young people and the different stakeholders are caught between a rock and a hard place. Some of the challenges that students are telling us they face is that sometimes these opportunities to learn outside of the academic world. So maybe when a guest lecturer from industry has been invited to speak, they're saying some of these events are organized and they clash with the academic courses. And so they're forced to choose between attending their lectures where they know they will have exams to write and attending some of these what they see as extracurricular activities. So many then don't show up. So there needs to be a lot of thought going into how to organize these events. Where do the career service, if they have them, and many institutions don't have career service provision or careers guidance support, many don't. But for those who do, again, it's about thinking creatively about how to plan these so that young students can find the right time to attend. I mean, some clever institutions have made it so that students have to get a number of credits from attending these career development programs before they can be offered opportunities for internships in workplaces. And so there's an incentive to actually do something about it, improving your own soft skills or understanding and being more savvy about the work environment and how to get in. So there's more that needs to be done and to educate these young people what they're missing out on, or to help structure these opportunities so that more can participate. But I think in many institutions, there just isn't that provision at all. And that's what we're trying to highlight and to encourage tertiary institutions to find a way to engage with those who can help them develop these sectors to enable young people to access it. But as Samuel said, there's so many opportunities online as well to at least tap in their videos. There are ways in which young people can at least start to understand what is needed to break through that barrier for getting into employment.
Maybe to add to what Pauline just said, I think the academics can also incorporate the development of these skills in their teaching. For example, if you want students to develop teamwork as the skills, you can set assignments that will involve groups. So instead of giving individual assignments, students can work in groups. And then that's through their interaction and discussion in solving that particular assignment to help them to develop some of these skills. And also in assessments, if you are a teacher and then you set exams and you only want to recall, students will also learn by rote to produce that fact for you. But if you set the exams that will require application of knowledge, then students will prepare in a way that will help them to read for understanding, because they know they are not going to reproduce facts, they are going to apply the facts. So these are some of the things that institutions or academics can do to help students to develop the soft skills that we are talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we just have a couple of minutes left if anyone wants to get in quick with a question. I think it's great to see the engagement. We've had lots of questions. There's still a lot that needs doing to address this issue. Again, we're happy to carry on this conversation beyond this session. Please have a look at the ESSA website. There's a lot of rich information about what we're doing, what we'd like to do, who we're engaging with, who else we could engage with. So please reach out to us after this session. There is going to be a break after this presentation. I think there's a 20-minute break, and then at the top of the hour, there'll be another session in plenary that people can join virtually. So we hope to see you on the other side. A comment was just coming from Sally saying it seems students also need to be aware of what employers see as limitations. Absolutely. And so our preliminary findings will be sharing. All of what we do at ESSA, we share as public goods. We share as publicly available information. And so we will be writing up a report on our findings more broadly to share with students. We're engaging with them directly, helping them with their advocacy work as well. And yeah, we will make all stakeholders aware of where the gaps are and where they can support these young people going forward. Thank you all so much for joining. And we hope to continue the conversation in another forum.